Welcome to The Architect of Synthesis, an exploration of Theodosius Dobzhansky, the pivotal figure who bridged the gap between field ecology and laboratory genetics. Imagine two worlds: on the left, the field, represented by the coccinellidie, the common ladybug, where nature thrives in complex, observable environments. On the right, the lab, home to the Drosophila fruit fly, where the molecular machinery of life is mapped through chromosomes and DNA. Dobzhansky's genius lay in his ability to unite these disparate domains. By reconciling the study of wild populations with rigorous genetic analysis, he forged the modern synthesis, forever transforming our understanding of evolution and the biological forces that shape life on Earth. Here, we encounter the defining ethos of Theodosius Dobzhansky's life work: nothing in biology makes sense except in the light of evolution. Much like a prism refracting white light into a brilliant spectrum, this singular principle allowed Dobzhansky to take the complex, fragmented fields of biological science and reveal their underlying unity. Over a monumental 55-year career, he authored more than 550 publications, effectively serving as the prism through which disparate disciplines, continents, and ideologies were brought into focus. By applying the lens of evolutionary theory, he did more than just conduct research. He established the cohesive foundation upon which all modern biological understanding is built, demonstrating that evolution is the vibrant, unifying spectrum that illuminates every corner of the natural world. Before Theodosius Dobzhansky, biology was fractured by a vast ideological divide. On one side stood the naturalists, focused on the grand, gradual scale of macroevolution, field observations, and Darwinian theory. On the other stood the geneticists, locked in the controlled environment of the laboratory, examining Mendelian inheritance and the abrupt, sudden mutations of organisms like those in Thomas Hunt Morgan's fly room. A profound chasm separated these two camps. Scientists simply could not bridge the gap to prove how small-scale laboratory mutations actually drove the origin of new species in the wild. Dobzhansky acted as the architect who built the bridge, fundamentally reconciling these perspectives to show that the mechanisms of microevolution are indeed the engine of life's diversity. Theodosius Dobzhansky's journey to becoming the architect of synthesis was a path that spanned continents and disciplines. Born in Ukraine, his early life was rooted in the outdoors, where he developed a naturalist's eye under the mentorship of Viktor Luchnik, specializing in ladybug beetles. In Leningrad, his education expanded to include the rigorous world of Drosophila genetics under Yuri Filipchenko. When he arrived in the United States in 1927 on a Rockefeller Fellowship, he brought a rare, dual perspective. He was uniquely both a field entomologist and a trained cytogeneticist. This rare combination of skills allowed him to join Thomas Hunt Morgan's legendary fly room and provided the intellectual bridge necessary to unify the disparate worlds of field observation and laboratory experimentation. In 1937, Theodosius Dobzhansky shattered a major scientific misconception. Before his work, the prevailing assumption was that wild populations were essentially genetically uniform. Dobzhansky proved the opposite by applying cytological methods to creatures in the wild, revealing a massive hidden reservoir of genetic variability beneath the surface. While the visible phenotypes of the flies might look similar, their genotypes, the subsurface reality of their chromosomes, contained a vast, diverse array of genetic material. This hidden diversity acts as the essential raw material for natural selection, providing wild populations with the flexibility to adapt rapidly to changing environments. It was this fundamental insight that finally bridged the gap between abstract laboratory genetics and the vibrant, evolving reality of the natural world. In his 1937 masterpiece, Genetics and the Origin of Species, Theodosius Dobzhansky provided the definitive blueprint for how evolution unfolds. He masterfully translated dense mathematical models, such as Sewall-Wright's shifting balance theory, into clear, actionable science. His process is outlined in three critical steps. Raw material: small, random genetic mutations occur frequently within a population. Population shift: natural selection drives changes in the frequency and combination of these mutations. Fixation: reproductive isolation cements these changes, ultimately creating a new species. By mapping this process, Dobzhansky provided the final proof that the microevolutionary changes observed in the lab are indeed the very same mechanisms driving the grand scale of macroevolution in the wild. Dobzhansky's 1937 work did not merely stand alone, it functioned as the catalyst for a scientific chain reaction, sparking the modern evolutionary synthesis. By successfully bridging the divide between genetics and natural history, he created a ripple effect that drew in other brilliant minds to consolidate the new paradigm. Following his lead, major thinkers across diverse fields integrated their own expertise into this unified framework. Ernst Mayr, 1942, applied these concepts to systematics. George Gaylord Simpson, 1944, extended them to the fossil record and paleontology. G. Ledyard Stebbins, 1950, unified them within botany and plant evolution. Together, they dismantled the old, siloed biological disciplines, uniting them under a single, powerful Darwinian Mendelian banner that remains the bedrock of modern biology today. A crowning achievement of Dobzhansky's career was his precise definition of speciation, a concept he crystallized in the mid-1930s. He introduced the essential term isolating mechanisms to describe the barriers that prevent gene flow between populations. Think of a unified gene pool as a single, free-flowing river. A speciation event acts like a massive dam, permanently dividing that river into two separate, distinct channels. Dobzhansky defined a species by this critical juncture. That precise stage when a formerly interbreeding population segregates into arrays that are physiologically incapable of exchanging genes. This established that reproductive isolation is the ultimate boundary in nature, the definitive dam that sets species apart and allows them to evolve along their own independent paths. Dobzhansky's scientific journey extended far beyond the laboratory, leading him to investigate how different environments dictate evolutionary paths. His earlier work with Drosophila pseudo-obscura in temperate zones revealed that harsh, fluctuating physical environments serve as the primary drivers of evolutionary change. However, beginning in 1943, his research shifted to the lush tropics with Drosophila willistoni. Here, he discovered a fundamental distinction. In stable, predictable tropical environments, the primary driver of natural selection is not the physical climate, but intense biological competition. By traveling to Brazil, Dobzhansky globally expanded the field of population genetics, proving that evolutionary pressures shift fundamentally based on ecological stability, a profound realization that added yet another layer of complexity to the modern synthesis. Dobzhansky's synthesis extended beyond fruit flies to the very nature of humanity. In his seminal 1962 work, Mankind Evolving, he introduced a revolutionary dual-process model. Human evolution is not merely biological, it is a feedback-driven system where biology and culture are deeply and inextricably interdependent. Facing the controversial Montague debate, Dobzhansky refused to shy away from the reality of diverging gene frequencies. Instead, he brilliantly weaponized population genetics against the prejudices of his time. He argued that human genetic diversity is vast, and rather than serving as a tool for division, this innate variety actually demands and reinforces democratic equality. By doing so, he effectively dismantled the pseudoscience of racial hierarchy, championing diversity as a fundamental, biological strength of our species. Dobzhansky's dedication to empirical truth placed him in direct opposition to the dangerous, state-sponsored pseudoscience known as Lysenkoism. While Soviet ideology enforced a dogma that rejected genetics and Darwinism in favor of forced environmental inheritance, often leading to the imprisonment or purging of dissenting scientists, Dobzhansky stood as a stalwart defender of evidence-based research. He championed scientific freedom by utilizing rigorous laboratory testing and mathematical modeling. In a striking act of resistance, he meticulously translated flawed Soviet works into English, specifically to expose their scientific illegitimacy to the global community. As a scientist personally impacted by Soviet purges, his life's work became a powerful, enduring testament to the necessity of integrity in science, even, and especially, when confronted by political oppression. Beyond his purely scientific contributions, Theodosius Dobzhansky occupied a unique intellectual space by advocating for the compatibility of faith and reason. In his 1967 work, The Biology of Ultimate Concern, he championed the concept of theistic evolution. Using a Venn diagram approach to his own philosophy, he illustrated that the empirical scientific method, grounded in observation, genetics, and evolutionary theory, could coexist harmoniously with the spiritual meaning derived from his Russian Orthodox Christian faith. He rejected the premise that these two realms were in conflict. Instead, he argued that they are complementary perspectives, famously proposing that evolution is God's, or nature's, method of creation, thereby showing that rigorous inquiry and religious belief can deepen our comprehensive understanding of the universe. The legacy of Theodosius Dobzhansky extends far beyond his own publications, living on through the brilliant minds he cultivated. As a charismatic and globally minded mentor, Dobzhansky acted as the root of a vast intellectual family tree. He actively drew promising younger researchers to his side in the United States, Brazil, and around the world, fostering a new generation of scientific pioneers. Among his influential protégés were Bruce Wallace, a leader in experimental population genetics; Richard Lewontin, who revolutionized molecular population genetics; and Francisco J. Ayala, a renowned evolutionary biologist and philosopher. By mentoring these scholars, Dobzhansky ensured that the principles of the modern synthesis would not only survive but continue to evolve and expand across the globe for decades to come. To conclude our exploration of Theodosius Dobzhansky, we arrive at the architectural masterpiece of his life's work. His legacy is not supported by a single pillar, but by four foundational supports that uphold our modern understanding of life. Lab genetics, the precision of Mendelian mutations and chromosomal mapping. Field naturalism, the vital insights gained from observing wild populations in their ecological contexts. Social equality, the recognition that human genetic diversity is the biological bedrock of a thriving democracy. Philosophy, the reconciliation of empirical scientific reality with spiritual meaning. Dobzhansky did more than just synthesize two branches of biology, he built a comprehensive, enduring framework where human culture, faith, and genetic diversity harmoniously coexist within an ever-evolving universe. Our journey concludes with a reflection on the man who redefined the landscape of biology. Theodosius Dobzhansky was more than a scientist, he was an architect of synthesis who dismantled the walls separating field naturalists from lab-bound geneticists. By grounding his work in the undeniable truth of evolution, he bridged diverse continents, disciplines, and ideologies. From the genetic reservoirs of the fruit fly to the complex cultural evolution of humanity, his legacy remains our foundation. He taught us that science, faith, and diversity are not contradictory forces, but complementary paths that, when viewed through the lens of evolution, illuminate the magnificent, interconnected reality of life itself.